ॐ गणानां त्वा गणपतिगुं हवामहे कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणस्पत आनशृण्वन्नोतिभिक्षीदसादनं प्रणो देवी सरस्वती वाजेभिर्वाजिनीवती धीनामवित्रयवतो गणेशाय नमः सरस्वत्यै नमः श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरः ॐ श्री महागणाधिपतये नमः सदाशिवसमारम्भां श्रीकण्ठाराध्यमध्यमां अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां सदाशिवं शिवां स्कन्दं केशवं पद्मसम्भवं नन्दीश्वरं कुम्भयोनिं भरद्वाजात्रिगौतमान् नमोऽस्तु गुरवे नित्यं श्रीकण्ठशिवयोगिने श्रुतिसारशिवविशिष्टाद्वैत परभाष्यविदायिने जगद्गुरु श्रीकण्ठाराध्या रेणुकाराध्या मंगलम देहि प्रभो त्रैलोक्यसम्पदालेख्य समुल्लेखनभित्तये सच्चिदानन्दरूपाय शिवाय ब्रह्मणे नमः यामाहुः सर्वलोकानां प्रकृतं शास्त्रपारगाः तां धर्मचारिणीं शम्भोः प्रणमामि परां शिवाम् अमृतार्थं प्रपन्नार्तां यासु विद्याप्रदायिनी अहर्निशमहं वन्दे ताम् ईशानमनोरमाम् ददीचिम् उपमन्युञ्च मार्कण्डेयं पराशरं श्वेताचार्यं तच्छिष्यं नीलकण्ठशिवाह्वयम् देवदेव महादेव देवानाम् अभयप्रद ब्रह्मनारायणेन्द्रादि सर्वदेव पदप्रद सांब शिवाय नमः. So thank you all for joining. 2 days back on Sunday we were looking at some of the verses from Bhagavad Gita, and we'll be continuing from there and trying to understand how the Bhagavad Gita verses glorify Lord Shiva alone, and we'll be also looking at some of the objections raised and how to answer that. So we saw Bhagavad Gita 15th chapter 17th verse, Uttama Purushastvanyaha Paramatmet Yudakritaha Yo Lokatrayam Avishya Bibharti Avyaya Ishvaraha. So it talks about another personality who is described as the Supreme Soul and residing in the heart of all the living entities, and also he is the imperishable Lord who has entered all the worlds. That's where Rigvedam 6th canto 74th chapter, it talks about where Lord Shiva enters into the living entities in the form of linga and resides in their heart, and then they become activated, and then he makes them to engage in karma so that they can engage in they can engage in karma, and then in course of time they get matured and they enter into engaging in Shiva Bhakti, and then they attain Mukti. So he enters into all the living entities, and also he enters this world as the Antaratma Vishvatmanam and the Antaryami of all the living entities, including the Devatas like Brahma and Vishnu, and then he activates us, energizes them. So he is the imperishable Lord, Paramatma, who is the Supreme Soul, the highest soul, Paratma. So Paramatma also comes very often in the Upanishads, very specifically for Lord Shiva. Tasya ashikaya madhye Paramatma vyavastitah sabrahma sashivah saharisendra soksharak paramaksparat radagam satyam param brahma purusham krishna pingalam urdvaretam virupaksham vishvarupam namamyaham. So Paramatma, Swarat means independent, Paramatma means the Supreme Soul, Purusha means the Supreme Reality, Purusho vai Rudraha. Uttama Purushaha, Chandogyam talks about Uttama Purushaha, the phrase Uttama Purushaha for Lord Shiva. And apart from that, the Shiva Sankalpa Suktam that is present in the Vedas, Rigvedam Kilabhagam, the 20th verse talks of Prayatah Pranavo Nityam Paramam Purushottamam Omkaram Paramatmanam Tanme Manashiva Sankalpamastu. He is described as Pranava, and he is Nitya, he is eternal. And also Paramam Purushottamam, he is the greatest of the greatest Purushas, and he is Omkara Svarupam. All these exactly match with the Atharvashiras. Atharvashiras Upanishad also talks of Pranava, Omkara. These kind of names are attributed to Lord Shiva, and it also gives the reason why these names are attributed to Lord Shiva. And then Paramatmanam, he is the Paramatma, the Supreme Soul. Tanme Manaha Shiva Sankalpamastu. Let my mind contemplate only on that Lord Shiva. Yo vai Veda Mahadevam Paramam Purushottamam Yak Sarvam Yasya Chit Sarvam Tanme Manashiva Sankalpamastu. So Mahadeva comes here. Mahadeva, the Supreme God, Paramam Purushottamam again. Yak Sarvam Yasya Chit Sarvam Tanme Manashiva Sankalpamastu. So this, Uttama Purusha is actually, or Purushottama is referring only to Lord Shiva. And then we have in Shiva Gita, there are verses in Shiva Gita and Ishvara Gita that matches with Bhagavad Gita. So Shiva Gita is a part of Padma Purana, as we already know. Ishvara Gita comes in the second canto of Kurma Purana. Okay, so there are various verses that is spoken by Lord Shiva himself, and Bhagavad Gita is also Shiva Svarupam, as we discussed in the previous classes. So Shiva Gita, 14th chapter, 37th verse, Lord Shiva says to Rama, because Rama is completely perplexed, totally perplexed, he doesn't know what to do after losing his wife. And then Agastya Maharshi asks him to engage in Shiva Bhakti. Take up the Mahapashupata Vratam or Atyashrama Vratam and then worship Lord Shiva, and then you will have darshan of Mahadeva, and then he will guide you. And that's what he says. So like Mahadeva comes and then shows us Virat Roop and those kind of things. We'll be seeing those things. So in the 14th chapter, 37th verse of Shiva Gita, Lord Shiva says to Rama, Daivi Hyesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya Mamevaye Prapadyante Maya Metam Tarantite. No, the Maya Shakti is very, very difficult to overcome. It's very, very powerful. So Mahadeva alone is eternal. But what the Maya Shakti does, the Maya is actually the Shakti of Lord Shiva. It makes you believe that there are other things that are eternal apart from Lord Shiva. It makes you divert, it takes you away from Mahadeva. So Mayam tu Prakritam Vidya, Mayenam tu Maheshwaram, 410 of Shvetashpatra Upanishad. Adavantecha Madhyecha Basase Nanyahetuna Mayaya Mohitaha Shambhor Mahadevam Jagadgurum. So the Maya is under the control of that Shambhu Mahadeva, that's what the Upanishads say. And here also Lord Shiva says the Maya is very difficult to overcome, but if one surrenders unto me, he can cross the three modes of material nature, and he can cross the repeated cycles of birth and death and attain mukti. And this exact verse comes in the Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter 14th verse. Daivi Hyesha Gunamahi Mama Maya Duratyaya Mamevaye Prapadyante Maya Metam Tarantite. Again told by Lord Shiva. Because Paramhi Brahma Katitam Yoga Yuktena Tanmaya. Krishna says that to Arjuna that he is incapable of reciting the Bhagavad Gita, and he was in Yoga Yukto. He was in yoga. He was in union with the Supreme Reality, Parabrahmam Paramashiva. So this is also told by Lord Shiva. This is already told by Lord Shiva to Rama, and again it is told by Lord Shiva to Arjuna. Through Krishna, Lord Shiva says that to Arjuna as Bhagavad Gita. And Shiva Gita, 14th chapter, 44th verse. Yat karoshi, yat ashnasi, yat juhoshi, dadasi, yat tapasyasi kaunte, yat tapasyasi ramam, tvam tat kurushva madarpanam. Shiva Gita. So whatever you eat and whatever you offer to the yajna, and whatever you give as donation and whatever austerities you perform, offer it in the mood that you are offering it to me. Offer it in the mood that you are offering it to Lord Shiva, so that you won't get any karma out of it. You will be free of karma. Whatever you eat and whatever you offer to the yajna, whatever you give as donation and whatever austerities you perform. So this comes in the 14th chapter, 44th verse. Yat karoshi, yat ashnasi, yat juhoshi, dadasi, yat tapasyasi ramatvam, tat kurushva madarpanam. Exactly the same verse comes in the 927 of Bhagavad Gita, which says yat tapasyasi kaunteya. There it is addressed to Arjuna. Actually it's Lord Shiva only addressing to Arjuna. Through Krishna he is addressing to Arjuna. You have seen that. So these verses are already repeated, already told by Lord Shiva. And then moving on, Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, 14th verse. Sarvatah panipadam tat sarvatok shishiro mukam sarvatah shrutimaloke sarvamavritya tishtati. So this is beautifully explained in the Upanishads, and also it comes in the Ishvara Gita. Everywhere, wherever you see are Lord Shiva's hands and Lord Shiva's legs and Lord Shiva's eyes and Lord Shiva's heads and faces and ears, everywhere. Wherever you see Mahadeva's mukha and Mahadeva's eyes and heads are there. So in this way, the super soul, Mahadeva's Shakti, though he is present beyond the universe, Vishvadipo Rudro Maharshihi, through his energy, he is all-pervading. Sarvo Vai Rudraha. And this interestingly comes in the Shvetashpatra Upanishad, 3rd chapter, 16th verse. Exactly the same verse. And also the Ishwar Gita, which is given by Lord Shiva, it comes in the 3rd chapter, 2nd verse. Exactly, it's told by Lord Shiva already, and then again through Krishna, Lord Shiva is conveying that to Arjuna. And an interesting thing, this verse, where Krishna actually prays to Lord Shiva in the Anushasana Parvam of Mahabharatam, 14th chapter. So there, in the 407th verse, he actually uses the same verse, Sarvatah Panipadam. So here, in the verse it says, Tat Sarvatok Shishiro Mukam. So Tat means that personality in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad and Bhagavad Gita and Ishvara Gita. But here Krishna himself confirms who is that personality. So he addresses that to Lord Shiva by saying, Sarvatah Panipadastvam Sarvatok Shishiro Mukam. So your Tvam means you, oh Lord Shiva, your hands and your legs and your eyes and heads and faces and ears are pervading everywhere. So you are that personality who is present, who is all pervading. Oh Mahadeva, your energy is all pervading. So here in the 407th verse of the 14th chapter, Anushasana Parvam, Krishna says that very beautifully to Lord Shiva, Tvam. And we have the another interesting verse in the Upanishads. Vishvatas chakshuruta vishvato muko vishvato hasta uta vishvataspa sambakubhyan amati sampatatraid dyava prativi janayan deva ekaha. It comes in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Also it comes in the Mahanarayana Upanishad and Shiva Sankalpa Suktam. Tanme Manashiva Sankalpamastu. It is usually recited as a part of Mahanyasam, the Shiva Sankalpa Suktam, which comes in the Rigvedam Kilabhagam. So, which means Vishvatas Chakshuhu. Lord Shiva's eyes are present as this entire universe. Vishvato Mukho. The entire universe is Lord Shiva's face. Vishvato Hasta. The entire universe is Lord Shiva's hands and then his feet. And he has created, this Prithvi has come from him. Somak Pavate Janita Matinam. Janita Divo Janita Prithivyaha. Janita Agner Janita Suryasya Janitendrasya Janitota Vishnoho. Parashakti and Paramashiva together, Soma, Shiva plus Uma, Soma, have created this entire universe, and also the Prithvi, Brahma, Indra, Agni, Surya and Vishnu. And then, see how the verses already, by default it matches with Ishvara Gita and Shiva Gita, and also Bhagavad Gita we have discussed. If one looks at, I think there are some new people who have joined, one can check out the playlist in my channel where I have I have done a deep dive in Bhagavad Gita and how Bhagavad Gita should be understood as the words of Lord Shiva, and there are various pramanams for that, where Vyasa himself explains and Narayana explains to Lakshmi that Bhagavad Gita is Shiva Svarupam. So one can check it out. And then the other verse, Bhagavad Gita 13th chapter 15th verse, Sarvendriya Guna Basam Sarvendriya Vivarjitam comes. He is beyond all the material senses. He cannot be understood with the senses or even by words. And that is what is told in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, 3rd chapter, 17th verse. We have seen many times how the Shvetashvatara Maharshi is described as a devotee of Lord Shiva only, and how that Upanishad talks about Pasham, Pashupati Pasham, bondage, and also it talks about Atyashrama Vratam being the highest of all. So which aligns only with Shaivism. It's actually a hardcore, it's actually a Shaivite Upanishad that glorifies Lord Shiva only. It cannot glorify another god like Brahma or Vishnu. So, Sarvendriya Gunabhasam. Interestingly, the same verse comes in the 3rd chapter, 17th verse of Shvetashvatara Upanishad. And then it ends by saying, Sarvasya Prabhum Ishanam Sarvasya Sharanam Sukrutam. Sarvasya Prabhum, he is the Lord of all, everything. Ishanam, he is the ultimate ruler. Sarvasya Sharanam Sukrutam. The only personality of, the only object of surrender. Mahadeva is the only object of surrender. Exactly the same verse is told in Ishvara Gita, 3rd chapter, 3rd verse by Lord Shiva to all the sages. So there is so much amount of correlation. And then, moving on, Ishvara Gita, 3rd chapter, 7th verse. Maya tatamidam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina matstani sarva bhutani nachaham tesh vavastitaha. So Lord Shiva says this in the 3rd chapter, 7th verse, and exactly it is told by, again, Lord Shiva in Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, 4th verse, through Krishna to Arjuna. So the same verse is told by Lord Shiva again, and as we see already at the end of Ishvara Gita also, the knowledge is passed on to different people, And at one point, in the second canto, Kurma Purana, 11th chapter, 131st verse, it says, it was the same Ishvara Gita that was given by Lord Shiva was passed on as Bhagavad Gita by Krishna to Arjuna. So it is actually the words of Lord Shiva. And the message that is passed is actually preaching Shiva Tattva only. Krishna just comes as an instrument to convey the message of Lord Shiva. So here, the Bhagavad Gita 9th chapter 4th verse is exactly matches with the Ishvara Gita 3rd chapter 7th verse, where Lord Shiva says, in my unmanifested form, because Mahadeva is also described as Arupam, Vibhum, which means, which doesn't exactly mean that he is formless. The formlessness is an attribute of the divine formed Maheshwara. So Vibhum means all pervading. So you cannot show his presence here or there. So like through his energy, through his Shakti, Mahadeva, though he is beyond the universe, Vishwadipo, Rudro Maharshihi, he is present in Parakailasha and being, or Mahakailasha and being served by crores and crores of Mukta Jivas. Still through his energy, he is all pervasive. And also he is present as the Antaryami of all the living entities. Paramatma. Kritpundarikam Virajam Vishuddham. Kaivalya Upanishad. Panchabrahma Upanishad. Chandogya Upanishad. Rudram Devanagam Kritagebhyo. Says, he is also present in the heart of the Devatas like Brahma and Narayana and Indra. So he is all pervading this entire universe through his Shakti. And all beings are part and parcel of me. That's what it is. Matstani sarva bhutani. Bhuta means the living entities. And then moving on. Ishvara Gita, 4th chapter, 2nd verse, and Bhagavad Gita, 11th chapter, 53rd verse exactly matches. Naham tapobir vividair na danena na chejnaya shakyo hi purushair nyatum mrite bhaktim anuttamam. So this slightly matches with the Bhagavad Gita 11th chapter 53rd verse, where Lord Shiva actually in the Ishvara Gita, he says, I cannot be realized by men who are engaging in various penances and providing various charities, doing various charities or by means of sacrifices. Only by true devotion. That's why Shraddha, Bhakti, Dhyana, Kaivalya Upanishad quotes Shraddha, Bhakti, Dhyana. All these three things are important. Shraddha means the unflinching faith in Lord Shiva. That Lord Shiva alone is the supreme reality and Lord Shiva alone can uplift me from the repeated cycles of birth and death. And then Bhakti, unflinching devotion, Dhyana. Because, we can get various hindrances in our devotion, right? Nandi had various hindrances. Upamanyu Maharshi had various hindrances. Shweta Maharshi also had various hindrances, but they did not lose the faith. Even Jaimini Maharshi, we saw that. So unflinching devotion should be there. And then Dhyana, meditating on the divine form of Maheshwara. That Panchamukha Swarupam of Mahadeva alone is the Tatparyam of Bhagavad Gita. The first 5 chapters are the first 5 faces. The next 10 chapters are the 10 hands of Lord Shiva. 16th chapter is the stomach and 17th and 18th chapter are the Padam, as told by Narayana to Lakshmi in Uttarakandam 175th chapter of Padma Purana. And then moving on. Namad Bhaktya Vinashyanti Mad Bhakta Vita Kalmashaha Adaveva Pratignatam Name Bhakta Pranashyati. Ishvara Gita, 4th chapter, 12th verse, Lord Shiva says, my devotees are devoid of sins. They are sinless. Only a sinless personality can remove the sins of the jivas. Mahadeva alone is described as sinless or beyond sins and virtues. Yate Rudra Shiva Tanu Ragho Rapapakashini. Apapakashini. He is not bound by sins or virtues. How Rama had to worship Lord Shiva to get rid of his sins. We saw that. Even Rama was telling to Lakshmana that I have done sins in my past janmas. And I'm suffering, I'm reaping, I'm suffering for that. That's the reason I've lost my dear Sita. Aranyakandam, 63rd chapter, 4th verse. And that connects with the Tulasi episode where Tulasi curses Vishnu. Narada Maharshi also curses Vishnu. So Mahadeva is beyond virtues and sins. So that's why he says, my devotees are devoid of sins and my devotees do not perish. My devotees are eternal. Name Bhaktah Pranashyati. This comes in Bhagavad Gita also, 9th chapter, 31st verse, where Lord Shiva says the same thing. And then Ishvara Gita, fourth chapter, this verse is interesting. 13th verse. Yovai nindati tam moodho. I think someone is on. Okay. Yeah, please go on mute. Thank you. So, Yovai nindati tam moodho devadevam sa nindati yohi pujayate bhaktya sa pujayati mam sada. The fool who censures, who actually hurts my devotee. Mahadeva says this. The fool who actually hurts my devotee actually hurts me, the Lord of the Devas. I am the Supreme Lord, and people who try to disturb my devotees are actually, and people who try to create trouble for my devotees, they are actually doing the same thing to me. So he who worships the Shiva Ganas with devotion actually worships me. That's what it says. So this again doesn't mean the Shiva Bhaktas are Lord Shiva. The Mahadeva has Ananya, the great respect for his Bhaktas. So any insult to his Bhaktas, he will consider that as an insult to himself. That's what it says. This verse was quite interesting. And Ishvara Gita again, 4th chapter 14th verse, and Bhagavad Gita 9th chapter 26th verse. Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhaktya mat aradana karanat yome dadati niyatam sa me bhaktah priyo mataha. A slight modification it comes in, with a slight modification it comes in Bhagavad Gita 9th chapter 26th verse. I'll be satisfied with if one offers to me a leaf or a flower or a fruit or just water, I'll be more with unflinching bhakti. Oh Mahadeva, please accept this. This is what I can do for you. Oh Lord Shiva, please accept this. Please accept your the offering from your bhakta. So in that way we have to go, not through ahankara. So with bhakti, if you offer, he will accept it. And he is also beloved. He or she is beloved. He will become my beloved. So which means he will be very dear to me. He or she will be very dear to me. So this same verse again told in Bhagavad Gita 9th chapter 26th verse by Lord Shiva. And then Ishvara Gita 6th chapter 46th verse. Bhumirapo. Here the 8 powers, the 8 principles. Bhumirapo nalo vayuhu kam mano buddhirevacha bhutadir adi prakritir niyogo mama vartate. Lord Shiva says, the earth, water, fire, air and ether, and also the mind, intelligence, and also the false ego and the prakriti is actually, they are under my control. And it's exactly comes in the Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter 4th verse. Again told by Lord Shiva. So how, these verses exactly match, and it is already conveyed by Lord Shiva. And Bhagavad Gita is also only Shiva Svarupam. So one can refer again the first two. Let me give you I think there are some new people. So yeah. So this is the link. So one can refer the playlist in order so that you'll be able to understand. So, and then Ishvara Gita 6th chapter 7th verse. Ekamshena jagat kritsnam karomi munipungavaha sagasramye karupena stitavasta mamaivatu atava bahunaitena. So this is told actually Ishvara Gita. It comes where Lord Shiva says in the 6th chapter 7th verse that with just this entire universe, whatever magnanimous things that you see in this world, we go to the Eiffel Tower and also we go to the the 7 wonders of the world, and then we look at them with a surprise. So whatever magnanimous things that you see in this world, everything, even including the universe, is just a spark of my splendor. Kritsnam, whatever, the whole thing, everything is actually a spark of my splendor. So Kritsnam means whole, and that comes in the Atharva Shiras Upanishad. Yo vai rudraksa bhagavan yaccha kritsnam tasmai vai namo namaha. My prostrations to the Bhagavan Rudra or Bhagavan Paramashiva, who has pervaded the entire universe. Kritsnam. And also this whole thing is actually a spark of his splendor. And that's what is told again in Bhagavad Gita 10th chapter 42nd verse with different wordings. Atava bahunaitena kimnyatena tavarjuna vishtabhyaham idam kritsnam ekamshena sthito jagat. Ekamsha. Just with my one of my amshas, I'm pervading. Lord Shiva again says that. And then Ishvara Gita chapter 7 exactly correlates with Bhagavad Gita chapter 10. Many of the verses. So where actually the divine, opulences of Lord Shiva are described. In Bhagavad Gita also, it's the opulences of Lord Shiva only. It's exactly told in Ishvara Gita chapter 7. Lord Shiva says that directly in Ishvara Gita and Shiva Gita. Indirectly it is told by Lord Shiva in Bhagavad Gita. Adityanam aham Vishnur vasunam asmi pavakaha. 7th chapter 4th verse of Ishvara Gita. Adityanam aham Vishnur. I am the Vishnu among the Aditya. So here the expansions, the opulences of Lord Shiva are described. And Rudranam Shankaraschasmi. Of all the Rudras, I am Shankara. And note the point, these are like 11 Rudras only, not Paramashiva. The 11 Rudras are completely different from Parvatipati Parameshwara. So the 11 Rudras are created by Lord Shiva to perform the act of destruction. So that should be remembered. And Adityanam Aham Vishnu comes in the 10:21 of Bhagavad Gita. Rudranam Shankaraschasmi comes in 10:23 of Bhagavad Gita. And then the entire chapter 6 talks about Shiva Gita. Shiva Gita chapter 6 talks about the same opulences told by Lord Shiva to Rama. So in the chapter 7 where Vishwarupam of Lord Shiva is shown in Shiva Gita, it's quite interesting. It says, Vidyut Koti Prabham Deeptam Atibhimam Bhayavaham Tadrishtwaiva Bhayad Dramo Janubhyam Avinam Gataha Pranamya Dandavad Bhumau Tushtavacha Punah Punaha. Lord Shiva actually shows his Virata Rupa or Vishwarupa to Rama. And Vishwarupam also, the word epithet Vishwarupam comes very often for Lord Shiva in the Vedas and Upanishads. Rudram says, Virupebhyo Vishwarupebhyascha vo namo namo mahadhyah kshullakebhyascha vo namo namo ratibhyo ratebhyascha vo namo namo. Vishwarupa, Virupa, Virupaksha and Vishwarupa. It comes. And Urdvaretam Virupaksham Vishwarupam namamyaham. He alone is Vishwarupi. So when he shows his Virata Rupa to Rama, and then it says, Vidyut Koti Prabham. Vidyut, we have seen that. Vidyut means lightning. So it's like Nilato Yadamadhyastad Vidyullekeva Bhaspara. Mahadeva and Mata Parashakti are present in the heart. It's like just like the lightning that comes in the midst of the blue clouds. Vidyut means lightning. Megyayacha Vidyutyayacha. 7th Anuvakam of Rudram also says. So Vidyut Koti Prabham. Like thousands and thousands of lightning. Rama saw thousands and crores of lightning within the mouth of Lord Shiva. Deeptam Atibhimam Bhayavaham. And then he got frightened. Tadrishtwaiva Bhayad Dramo Janubhyam Avinam Gataha Pranamya Dandavad Bhumau Tushtavacha Punah Punaha. He got frightened. Oh Mahadeva, what is this? Your Vishwarupa is very fearful. And then he falls at the feet. Dandavad Bhumau. He falls flat. And then he does a beautiful stuti. Atottaya Mahaviro Yavadeva Prapashyati Paktram Pura Bitas Tatra Antar Brahmanda Kotayaha. He could see like millions and millions. Koti, crores and actually not millions, crores and crores of universes within the body of Lord Shiva. And then he could see all the Devatas, Saraswati, Indrani, Lakshmi, Brahma, Indra, all the Devatas, and he could see himself. Even the, here it says 19th verse of the Shiva Gita chapter 7, Vishnor Dashavataramscha Tattat Karmanyapi Dvijaha. He could see like 10 incarnations of Vishnu, including himself, including Rama himself, in the body of Lord Shiva. And then he understood the mystic opulence of Lord Shiva. So this is told in the Shiva Gita chapter 7. And also the reason why I quoted this is that the Vishwarupam, as shown in Bhagavad Gita chapter 11, is also that of Lord Shiva. And we'll be seeing that.